I'd like to report to you the email that I received from Mike Rubani representing the EDA and the meetings that the EDA had on the community center and also the motel. In the negotiations of moving forward with the project, I had a fiduciary responsibility to report to the bank on how we were coming. And so I requested from Mike Rubani what the EDA had agreed to and what we agreed to as far as the community center. Under community center it says the city will put in $595,000 cash and we will finish the project off. The contribution buys the motels a 20-year lease of and use of the facility. The rental agreement says that any nonprofit of the city, school, county will be able to use that free of charge. And in the fundraising, they'll be able to use that with half rents. Then the city will keep the ownership of the building and the land. The city keeps the $20,000 a year. That was part of our lease. That would actually have an even over with decreasing the assessments by $170,000, and the extra $75,000 would come over to decrease the motel's assessments. That $20,000 a year for we're paid, and according to the lease, paid to the community center, would do the same thing as what we ended up doing with the decrease in assessments. There was an extra $75,000 that would move over to the assessments on the motel. And then we talked about a tax abatement and TIF district for the motel, which gave the motel $150,000 in present value terms. And so at the end, in the conclusion, that TIF would pay assessments and a decrease of the land down to $87,000, and that would be paid for by the owners of the motel. Then we had a low interest loan of $160,000 to subordinate the mortgage and the personal guarantees of the motel. That's what the EDA recommended to move forward for council approval. Now, after that negotiations with the EDA, I received a email and a fax from Terry Chitalo concerning the where we're at with the banks, and the bank meaning Merchants Bank in Winona. And so I handed out to you the email that I sent to Chris Dolman, who is the junior financial advocate that works with SBA for the motel financing. We met with her today. 3 weeks ago, they had determined that they wouldn't finance the project simply because of the fact that there's been a lot of negativity, and I use their words as a quote. We've lived with that for a few years. And today they said, if we get a letter from the city saying that they could consider these agreements as part of the project, they'll then reconsider the financing. I need to raise 23% more ownership for the motel, and I promised I'd have it done in a 2-week period of time. I also told your city attorney that I mentioned the necessity of the city needing some commitments from the bank, so there's a chicken and egg deal. The bank needs a commitment from the city needs a commitment from the bank, and so how they work that out is I've asked Terry to call Chris and talk to Dave Gruey about how this can be accomplished. I'm not here to ask you to approve the EDA agreements that we had and that they support. If you factually don't want to do it, I think there'll be heartburn on the bank's position to finance the project. I'll answer any questions, and we can go forward as best we can.
Where do we stand right now, Terry?
Okay, I'll just stand up so everyone can hear me. I just want to be very clear on the process that I take to look at these matters. I was not privy to the negotiations with the EDA, so when I was following email strings, I raised a concern. In your business subsidy ordinance, you have a requirement that's called the but-for test, meaning that business subsidies would be available to all projects that would not otherwise occur but for the assistance of the city that's being requested. And that's important. That's in the very first part of your ordinance, because your EDA and the city has limited funds. And the goals of the EDA and public funds and business subsidies are set forth by either creating jobs, increasing your tax base, eliminating blight, doing all these important things for the city. And it's a finite resource. There's only so much money there. So what you want to do as a city, and the reason for the but-for test, is you want people to come forward with a plan, and they tell the city that here's my plan, this is what it's going to cost, this is what I have available to me. If you don't fill that gap in that financing to meet these goals, this project can't happen, and that's the but-for test. So what we're trying to do, and what I'm trying to work with Tom with here in a very positive way, is to get the bank to commit to a level of financing in writing. And it can be conditional. It can be subject to this, this, and this. That then will allow the EDA and the city to apply their but-for test. So I'm going to be very straight on this. I'm trying to maximize the private investment in this project. I'm trying to minimize what the city has to put in order to make this thing work, because there's other people that want this money. So we're trying to use the but-for test to maximize city dollars that are limited. So I've urged Tom, and he's authorized his lender to talk to me, and I'm going to encourage them to provide a commitment for financing to the city, detailing out the amount of non-Rushford dollars, non-subsidy dollars, private dollars, bank dollars, owner equity, whatever it may be, as long as it's not City of Rushford related, and come up with that figure. We subtract that from the entire project cost, and then that could be the amount of money that would be subject to a subsidy. And then you can run it through your analysis on TIF or loans or whatever. But we're trying to come up with that figure from private financing so that we can do the but-for test to see what the city has to kick in to make this work. But I want to be clear, it's the minimum that you have to kick in to make it work, not the maximum. Because if you do the maximum, then you can't do the but-for test. So I want to be very clear in my analysis. That's what I'm telling the EDA and all these loans, do your but-for test. Run through it. See what the project costs, what private money is available, and then, is there a gap? What can we fill? We can't do that until we get the bank to tell us what that private piece is. I'm going to work with Tom, I'm going to call his banker, we're going to try to get that figure, then we can present something to the EDA and the City Council that says, you commit to this figure, we can get the project done, you can run your analysis. Until that point, you can't do your but-for test. So, are there any questions on my reasoning for sending the email saying we need a commitment from the bank, we need a figure, and if there's a gap in financing, then we'll know, and then we can maybe fashion something to make this happen. Until that occurs, it's very difficult to do your but-for test because it just doesn't work.